Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for joining this meeting. Just wanted to set up a weekly sync between design and PM. We can meter the cadence if needed. Um, and also let me know what you guys think about the length of time. We can also shorten it. Um, so today I kind of wanted to talk about how we should plan milestone 17.5 in relation to design tasks. 17.5 is coming up next week. And that will be from September 14th to October 11th. And mostly I would kind of just like to see what's feasible for design and if there's any needs from engineering or PM that we could support you with, Derek. Um, so just as a note, I am off for some days in this milestone. Um, and uh, yeah, so also I talked to Andy and he brought up some other tasks for the next milestone that we didn't talk about in our previous meeting. So one thing is the UX scorecard. So that's an OKR for design for Q3. And I think he said that estimate for that would be less than a month of work, but scheduling users and filling out the scorecard and coordinating with different people might take some time. So that doesn't have any cross team dependencies, but it is something that we should factor in to be done before October 31st. And then I kind of put together a proposal for what I would think is feasible for 17.5. Didn't want to be like too ambitious given that I am a new hire. Um, but this is already in flight, and I wanted to review some designs with the UX team today. Um, Provide a view of users' branches also seems pretty like a quick win. Um, for the branch rule slippage from Q2, honestly, that's a pretty big epic. And I haven't had time to fully gain context into that. I know it's mostly maintenance, but um, I guess my question is like, Michael, do you foresee this being like a big task?
Um, I don't see this being a big task in that the key items for branch roles has been completed with editing, and that's been released this week. So that's good. So like the slippage from Q2 has been like resolved, and it's just the outstanding issues. So I think with the outstanding issues, there's a post MVC epic around there, and it probably needs a little bit of attention from myself for triaging, like, okay, what of this needs to be done? Because out of the three of us, I probably have the most context on that area. And for 17.5, I think is low. But I hear rumors in the works that because we've completed the editing and everything, whether there's a future direction of making this kind of like the foundations of settings in the world of source code and projects to be like, okay, what's next after this? Like, how do we use this momentum that we have now and consider doing more with that? And I think that is not well like documented yet. Like, what's that next part going to be? Marie Christine and I were looking into what that next steps looks like, but yeah, I switched groups and she's been away for a while, so that kind of lost momentum. But Derek, Do you have any points on like what this branch rule sets us up for, and like what's that time frame you're looking at, thinking about tackling that?
Uh, um, I think that my main thing that I was thinking about that this could set us up for is more in the realm of making sure that we're aligned with the security policies team so that we can provide a better view across the board, um, not just for branch rules, but also new policies, um, and providing a more consistent experience. Um, I've talked to Kai about it quite a bit, and because I think that it'll be end up being a collaboration between source code, code review, and security policies. But I think that this gets us to the point to where we can start to look at the overall rules and settings experience in source code and how does that tie into the other teams, and do we end up having like a single editor, just different ways to enforce it with security policies versus the standard rules. I don't know all the details or exactly even where I'd want to go, but it seems to me like this first part of it sets us up well to do something more along those lines. So as far as timeline though, I don't really have any thoughts on that. I'm not sure that it's a super high priority. Um, but next year, one of the main product themes is going to be around usability. So it's definitely something that we're going to want to look at and see if there is anything that we can improve here. But I need to take a closer look at it. I kind of gave it to Christine when she joined, and I haven't really taken a look at it or thought about it too much since then. So I'd need to double check it and think about like what the next steps would be, and if it would be as high a priority of as some of these other things that we could do. I'm just not sure right now.
Okay. Thank you guys for that insight. Um,
Mute myself. Sorry, I was muted. Um, my quick 2 cents on what Derek Lee just said. I think there's two aspects: providing a better view across the board and like having a consistent experience of editing across settings. I think we will have a better impact if we can improve the better view across the board. Um, one of the problems with the settings in source code, like the journey so far to get to branch rules, is like just setting up the rules. Like if I do this, what will happen? Um, and I think we can link up a whole bunch of issues actually to support and dig deeper into this to explore further. I think the editing of the settings is an interesting one, and that might have some collaboration opportunities with personal productivity because they're looking at settings holistically. And I'm kind of interjecting in some of their epics saying like, yeah, like editing is cool, but like we have like a lot of problems, with confirmation. So the way Marie Christine and I were thinking about the settings is like ha giving increasing the confidence of users when they're using our tools to set things so that if I set a approval rule or branch protection or security policies, I want to know what will happen to my branches without me requiring to like create a dummy MR just to see what rules will like spawn out or like, will this rule match this one or is it like overlapping with a group rule that I'm not sure of? And I think having some kind of visibility around that at least was, I think that the direction the branch rules detail view where you get to see all the rules there. I think there could be a lot more that we do in informing the user of what rules have been set up and potentially even exploring the path of showing previews of like, okay, if you set this rule, here's the conflicts, or like here's like the three rules that overlap on this one branch. And you may not know that, like, and it may not matter, but there might be many cases where you're like, oh, actually, this protected branch and this protected branch is doing this, and then our rules around allowing the most permissive rules to go through can like create a weird experience for people who are setting up a repository. And I think that has, mm, I think, more a stronger kind of use case and like opportunity to make it better for our customers when they're using our settings so that whether if you're setting security policies or group rules or project, you know what the downstream effects are, or you know how your downstream. No, right now we don't have a view on security policies in projects, but like you're like, oh, maybe I should set up a security approval rule. It's like, no, that's not necessary because your project's already being target for, security policies to jump in if a pipeline issue triggers it. So I think little things like that um, is is good to do because it provides visibility, and I think it's like it's querying or pulling information from our system already versus trying to wrangle settings into a new experience, into a consistent experience, which I think is also useful. So like how you set up things at a project level is the same way you set things up at a group and a security policy. So whether you're on Ultimate or the free plan is similar and familiar, I think that's a good use case. But I think the even our journey getting to here is like, what will happen if this happens? And then
Mhm.
engineers are asking engineers, and they're like, if we don't know, then how will our customers know? Because they don't have a lifeline to Gavin or Joe to like look into the code base.
Right. Well, that makes complete sense. Um, Maybe so since we've um let's see, since we're what when did Q3 start in August? So we're like halfway through Q3 right now. Maybe Q4 might be a good time to start looking at what can we do with this now, or like now that we have the branch rules editing in place, where can we go from there? Um, Might be, it depends on, I guess it depends on what all we have in Q3 right now, but that might be a good thing to queue up for Q4.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like Alyssa said, this is like she's still new, and Q4 starts in November, so that kind of gives a little bit of time to work through some of these more known issues, and then I feel like November, December could be a good time to explore that further.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, the branch rule slippage from Q2 has some maintenance work from Michael. But there's a huge opportunity here to approach how we're doing settings across the board. And that exploration would be better suited for Q4. Okay, cool. So, okay, cool. Thanks for capturing that. That was super helpful. Um, for commit list details and improvements, I wasn't sure if we should add that to the list because it's not a pressing priority right now. Um, and wasn't really sure what the capacity would be. Michael, I saw that you've added directory and single page updates. Um, did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Since this is like design tasks for 17.5, the engineering team are starting to look at doing spikes on what it might take to reconfigure or like lay out the core pages of the code area so that there's a title to the page, consistent breadcrumbs, like the page kind of structure so that it's all like view components and all that. Um, During this time, there's also like some feedback issues from the directory and single file page. From a design perspective, there's some questions about, is the find file, like the best way done there? Um, is the two breadcrumb system something that we need? And if we need it, do we do what we have today as a first iteration, or do we like try to push something further, kind of in spirit of the work item stuff, or if there's something if there's a better way to do that. So there's a few questions out there outstanding that I didn't address yet. So I feel from a design standpoint can help clarify and refine some of those questions um, during this time, within the mind that like engineering is kind of looking at the proposal as like chunks, like, okay, we need this, 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 and then what would this look like as a view component, and how does this work across all the different pages? So keeping your pulse on that, as in like, all right, do we need to make fundamental changes, or is it like, cool, this is just to understand how the sequencing of events may go down. Yeah.
Mhm. I think that makes sense. And if the engineering team is already doing spikes, um, it sounds like it might be more important than, I guess, some of the other design issues that we have. So I think that makes sense to put in the next milestone, given all the reasoning. Um, Michael, if you were to prioritize it, where would you put this?
I think the quick action would be just to like review the feedback and like create issues on things that need to be addressed, and like kind of like tie off the issue so that there's clear actions. So like I kind of like hand waved and said, oh, maybe the breadcrumbs or maybe the find file, but I think just triaging that feedback issue, wrapping it up, and like create next follow-up action items. I think where it falls in the current list of like one, two, three here, it is, it could be like, I would say it could be a two or a three, as in like, because it's in parallel of engineering. So if there's anything glaring from the triage, so the triaging part is probably the most important, so that between you and I, we're like, okay, there's nothing like fundamentally that we would want to change here, that we're like pretty cool with this. Or if there's like, oh no, it's like this is actually a big concern. There could be possible paths here. And so the triaging is the most important so that we can inform the spike a little bit more better about, yes, this has the potential to change, this doesn't have the potential to change. But after that, I think like addressing like the designs and like iterating through and refining the designs, that kind of sits yeah, like three, because I feel like the other two, you kind of have a better idea of where you're going to go with that. So those can fly off. And then it gives this will be your kind of like things you work on once those other two are done. Because those other two sets up like 17.6 pretty well. And then this stuff is big. There's, and there could be things in there that sets up 17.6 as well. So uh, my gut feel is like there's nothing major, but uh, yeah, maybe I'm just too optimistic here. So maybe I think the next course of action, maybe like early next week, you and I just sync up and just uh, go through the feedback items. We can either do that, yeah, we can speak offline how we want to handle that. But yeah, I think that's.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for all of that context, Michael. This is super, super helpful. Um, okay. So I think simplify UI, file blob, view of users branches pretty fast. And then triaging we can do next week. And then that'll set us up for future tickets. Um, and then it seems like we are moving MVC branch rule slippage to Q4. Um, and then I'm wondering about the commit list detail improvements, if that would be good to add for 17.5 in design, or if that's too ambitious with everything else going on in the scorecard as well. I know that's a
I
hard.
think it's too. I think it's too ambitious to tackle designs around it. What I think would be useful is for you to be familiar with known issues and the jobs to be done related to the commit issues. So I think this scorecard can help build more like context around commit lists and stuff like that. So I think what might be useful is looking at just generally the commit list, getting familiar with all the issues in there. But I don't think you need to start design or deep research yet because you have a lot on your plate. But if you have time, there's a lot of reading or like connecting the dots or a sense making of the problems, the requests that we have from for commit lists. And yeah,
Oh,
so yeah.
Yesterday in the product meeting, Jeremy Elder presented the all the stuff around dark mode that they're doing. Is there any work for individual designers to update like their areas or that you're responsible for, or is that team taking care of pretty much all of that?
That team's handling all of that, as in like
Okay.
the UI. Magically, one
Yeah,
day we show up and it's like dark mode works. Yes.
cool. Okay.
Yeah, I think the only thing from a design front end perspective is that dark mode also brings in the language of design tokens or variables. So then communication between UX and front end will probably be a little bit more refined. Like, oh, use the subtle text color versus like use gray 700. So
Mhm.
things like that. There'll probably be more emphasis in front-end engineering around providing proper backgrounds to components and screens so that when you do like modals and popovers and things like that, um, that it respects the different color backgrounds depending on the context. But I think most of that's handled at the component level, so it should be okay.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else you guys can think of that might be good for design to tackle in 17.5? No.
I don't think so. There might be some little things that come up here and there. I've heard, there's been a couple of customer requests that I might, ask you to take a look at and just see what you think, but I can't think of anything big right now.
Okay. Um, and then the next thing I wanted to ask was how to best integrate um, the UX task with the, I guess, planning issue. Let me just share my screen. So I know that the planning issue has links to the UX planning board and the UX build board. Um, but these boards are pretty, I guess, massive, and I guess what would be the most useful way to transition like what we talked about today to these boards that the team can interact with?
Um, I know this is probably more like between you and Derek, but I think what you have right here, the one, two, three, four, or like the key priorities listed as like this is the stuff I'm looking at, and then this is what I'm looking at. Like a simple list might be useful in the planning issue versus a link to the board. Because if the
Okay.
board is overwhelming for you to use, and I don't know who else is looking at that board, because that was just my kind of pseudo way to do a list without having to do a list. But I think the way you're operating so far, where you have a clear list of like, oh, this is what I'm looking at, like one, two, three, what we just discussed so far. I think having that on the planning issue would be useful. And then um, but if you want to use the board, then that's fine too. If you don't think the board's useful anymore and you just want to like ditch it, then yeah, we can ditch that from the prioritization issue template if necessary. Because that's just like an auto link that links to the UX planning board. So this is your world for a little bit of now, and it's like Derek's little world for the time being. So how how you both want to use and inform the rest of the group on how you're doing the design work is up to you. You don't need to use the boards. It's not like a must have. Like having this list of four things is a lot more clear. It's like, okay, yeah, let's just look at these four things or five things. Cool.
Um, Michael, just so I know what I can touch, like, are you the only person that was maintaining these two UX boards?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and then if I were to like reapproach this, I guess would I have ownership of anything that has like a UX level?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I might try to take a second look at this, but because it had so many items, I've kind of made like a personal board this doesn't necessarily have to be for the team, but it's just to make it a little bit more manageable for me. If this is more useful or more parallel to like the little list that we have in Google Docs, then it might be easier for me to link this. Um, Essentially, I got this idea from Mike Nichols, who is my design buddy, and he basically just makes like placeholder issues, which links to an actual GitLab issue, um, just for personal management and also working across different projects easily. So that's also an idea. Um, that I guess Derek, you and I can kind of figure out what works best.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really, I mean, really between us and Marie when she gets back, but the PM and designer to figure out what works for them, and then whatever, however we decide to go with it, the team can come along with and see it. But yeah, think about what works for you and how you would want to see all this stuff, and then we can start to make a plan to address it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. Um, and then as far as last week we talked about the resourcing from UXR. I brought that to Andy, and his feedback was that um, the UXR team is mostly prioritizing problem validation, and LFS and code owners are already established problems. So what he thinks would be most useful is the research that Ben is currently doing on defining the jobs to be done, which will give us like a baseline, um, so that like future things that we evaluate on the UI um, have some sort of like common established, well, research base. And he thinks that's going to be really valuable, rather than just like throwing stuff out just so that we can get UXR resources. Are What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because I know we were talking about research last week.
I think yeah, I think that sounds great. Um, yeah, the getting UX research involved was kind of a secondary thought. Like if they were wanting more things to work on, if they didn't feel like they had enough for Q3, then we could have done some more specific research. But Andy's right. I mean, we know that there's problems with code owners and LFS, and we may not know all of the details around all of those problems, but we know quite a bit, and we can figure things out if UXR has other things to focus on, which I'm totally fine with.
Okay. Um, Michael, are you aligned in that as well?
Yeah, nine then.
Okay. And then Derek, I know that you were thinking of revisiting the roadmap. Do you know if anything needs to be updated there?
It still needs to be updated. I have not been able to get to it. I really need to do that, but I just haven't yet.
Okay, nice. Okay. Um, okay. Well, this was very helpful. Thank you very much. And I will take a look at the boards. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Take a look at how to approach adding the issues to some sort of board or linking the list to the planning issue. And then next week, Michael, we can sync on the branch stuff and triage. And then Eric, I guess we'll wait for updates on the roadmap. And yeah, we can leave. Um, so thank you very much for the one-off meetings. I do want to set up like a regular cadence sync. But I am leaving Thailand next week and moving through some time zones. So I'm just like scheduling one-off meetings until the time zone stabilizes. So I appreciate you guys being patient with that.
Yeah,
Um,
not a problem.
well, I will stop the recording now.